Queen Syra'Neth of the Kral'Veth Empire stood at the observation deck of her warship, watching the planet below burn in patches of orange and black. She had seen 100 worlds fall. She had commanded fleets that shattered civilizations older than humanity's first stone tools. But this war was different. The humans had come from nowhere, a species barely 3 centuries into spaceflight, yet fighting with a ferocity that defied all logical analysis. They were fragile, short-lived. Their bodies broke so easily, and yet they kept coming. "My queen," Warlord Kethral approached, his 4 arms pressed against his chest in the traditional salute. His chitinous face betrayed nothing, but Syra'Neth had known him for 60 cycles. She could read the tension in his movements. The human forces have fortified the northern valley. 3,000 soldiers, perhaps less. Syra'Neth's silver eyes narrowed. They had 20,000 warriors on the ground. 3,000 humans should have been insignificant? Should have been. And our casualties? Kethral hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. 4,000, my queen. In 2 days. The number hung in the air like poison. 4,000 Kral'Veth warriors, each one trained from birth, each one worth 10 of any other species' soldiers, dead at the hands of creatures who lived barely a century. How? The word escaped her before she could stop it. "They don't retreat," Kethral said quietly. "They should. Any rational species would. But they hold positions until death. They sacrifice themselves to buy time for others to escape. He paused, searching for words. They fight as if dying means nothing to them." Syra'Neth turned back to the viewport. She had studied humans before this war. She knew their biology, their history, their primitive social structures. They were supposed to be weak, emotional, slaves to their short lifespans and shorter tempers. She had not expected them to be this. "Mother?" The small voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. Syra'Neth turned to find her daughter standing in the doorway of the observation deck, her pale blue skin almost luminescent in the dim light. Syra'Neth was 8 cycles old, barely more than an infant by Kral'Veth standards. Her eyes, the same silver as her mother's, were wide with confusion. "Lyra. Syra'Neth crossed the room quickly, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. "You should be in the secure chamber. Why are you here? I heard the alarms. I was scared." Lyra's small hands clutched at her mother's robe. "Are the humans coming?" Syra'Neth felt something twist in her chest. She had kept Lyra sheltered from the worst of the war, but children heard things. They always did. "The humans are far away," she said softly. "They cannot reach us here." It was a lie. The humans had already breached 3 defensive lines that were supposed to be impenetrable. Nothing seemed to stop them for long. "Why do they hate us?" Lyra asked. Syra'Neth paused. It was a question she had asked herself many times. The war had begun over a border dispute, a small colony world that both species had claimed. It should have been resolved through negotiation. The Kral'Veth had offered terms. The humans had refused. "I don't know," Syra'Neth admitted. "Perhaps they don't hate us. Perhaps they simply fight. It seems to be what they do." "That's sad," Lyra said. Syra'Neth looked at her daughter, so young, so innocent, and felt the weight of the crown press down on her. She was queen. She had to protect her people. She had to win this war. But looking at Lyra, she wondered what victory would even mean. "Go back to the secure chamber," she said gently. "I will come see you when I can." Lyra nodded, but her eyes lingered on the viewport, on the burning world below. Then she turned and walked away, her small footsteps echoing in the silence. Kethral waited until she was gone before speaking. "The evacuation ships are ready, my queen. If the battle turns, it won't," Syra'Neth interrupted. "We outnumber them. We have superior technology. We will win." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. The battle for the northern valley began at dawn. Syra'Neth watched from the command center as her forces advanced across the rocky terrain, their formations precise and disciplined. The Kral'Veth had perfected warfare over millennia. Every movement was calculated. Every attack was coordinated. The humans waited for them behind hastily constructed barricades, walls of rubble and metal that looked almost pathetic compared to the Kral'Veth's gleaming war machines. "First wave engaging," Kethril reported. On the tactical display, Syra'Neth watched the blue dots of her soldiers converge on the red cluster of human positions. The first shots were fired. The first casualties fell. And then the humans did something unexpected. Instead of holding their positions, a small group broke from the main force and charged directly at the Kral'Veth line. Not retreating, not flanking, charging. Straight into the teeth of her army. "What are they doing?" Syra'Neth demanded. "Unknown, my queen. They appear to be." Kethril stopped. His mandibles clicked in confusion. "They're targeting our artillery positions. They're sacrificing themselves to create an opening." Syra'Neth watched in horrified fascination as the small human unit was cut down one by one. But they kept moving forward, kept firing, kept drawing attention away from the main defensive line. And in the chaos they created, the other humans repositioned, reinforced, prepared. 15 humans died in that charge. They bought their comrades 3 hours. "I don't understand," Syra'Neth murmured. "Why would they do that? They must have known they would die." "They knew," Kethril said quietly. "They chose it anyway." The battle raged for hours. The Kral'Veth pushed forward, taking ground inch by bloody inch. But every victory cost more than it should. Every position taken was paid for in lives. And still the humans refused to break. By midday, the reports coming in painted a picture that Syra'Neth could barely comprehend. Human medics running into active fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety. Human officers staying behind to cover retreats, knowing they would never escape. Human soldiers sharing their last ammunition with each other, fighting until their weapons were empty, and then fighting with their hands. "They're not soldiers," Kethril said at one point, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. "They're something else entirely." Syra'Neth didn't respond. She was watching a single human on the tactical display, a figure moving through the battlefield, not attacking but helping, pulling wounded soldiers to cover, applying medical treatment under fire. The figure moved between human and Kral'Veth wounded alike, treating anyone who needed help. "Who is that?" she asked. Kethril consulted his data. "Human field medic. Their records identify him as Sergeant Marcus Cole. He's been operating in the combat zone for 7 hours without rest. 7 hours. In the middle of a battle, helping anyone he could reach. He's treating our wounded," Syra'Neth said, not quite believing what she was seeing. "Yes, my queen. Several of our soldiers report that he saved their lives." Kethril's voice was flat, but Syra'Neth could hear the confusion beneath it. "I do not understand why." Neither did Syra'Neth. "In Kral'Veth warfare, you did not help the enemy. You destroyed them utterly, or you were destroyed yourself. There was no middle ground. No mercy. But this human, this fragile, short-lived creature, was risking his life to save people who were trying to kill him." "He's insane," Kethril concluded. "Perhaps," Syra'Neth said slowly. "Or perhaps we have misunderstood something fundamental about them." The battle continued. The sun set. And still, the humans held. The second day of fighting brought desperation. Syra'Neth had committed her reserves, thrown everything she had at the human positions, and still they endured. Her forces had taken the eastern ridge, the southern approach, most of the valley floor. But the humans had consolidated around a single hill, a rocky outcrop that overlooked the only viable landing zone for evacuation ships. They were protecting something. Someone. Intelligence reports indicate human civilian refugees behind their lines, Kethril informed her. Approximately 2,000, including children. They are waiting for evacuation. 2,000 civilians. That's what the humans were dying for. Not territory. Not resources. People. If we take that hill, the civilians will be trapped, Syra'Neth said. Yes, my queen. Without evacuation, they will likely perish. The planet's atmosphere is becoming toxic from the battle damage. Syra'Neth closed her eyes. This was war. Civilians died in war. It was unfortunate but unavoidable. The Kral'Veth way was to accept such losses as the price of victory. But something had shifted in her over the past 2 days. Watching the humans fight, watching them die for each other, sacrifice everything for strangers, had awakened something she couldn't name. And the medic? She asked. Sergeant Cole? Still active, my queen. He has established a medical station at the base of the hill. He continues to treat wounded from both sides. Both sides. Even now. A proximity alarm shattered her thoughts. Red lights flashed across the command center. My queen! An officer's voice was sharp with panic. Hull breach in Section 7. Human infiltrators. The explosion rocked the ship. Syra'Neth grabbed the nearest console to steady herself as the deck tilted beneath her feet. The princess! She shouted. Where is Lyra? The secure chamber, my queen. I'll send guards. Another explosion. Closer this time. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. Syra'Neth didn't wait for her guards. She ran. The corridors of her ship had become a maze of smoke and debris. She could hear weapons fire in the distance. Human weapons, their sharp cracks unmistakable. They had boarded her vessel. They were inside. She reached the secure chamber to find the door blown open, the guards who had been stationed there lying motionless on the floor. Her heart stopped. Lyra! The chamber was empty. Syra'Neth felt the world tilt around her. Her daughter. Her child. Gone. Taken. My queen. Kethral's voice crackled through her communicator. The human infiltrators have retreated to the surface. They took. His voice broke. They took the princess. Syra'Neth stood in the ruined chamber, surrounded by the bodies of her guards, and felt something she had never experienced before, complete, paralyzing terror. Not for herself. For her daughter. Prepare my shuttle, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm going to the surface. My queen, that's suicide. The battle. I'm going to get my daughter back. She turned and walked toward the hangar, her footsteps steady despite the trembling in her hands. Even if I have to walk through every human soldier on that planet to do it. The shuttle descended through clouds of smoke and ash. Below, the battlefield stretched out like a wound in the earth, craters and trenches, burning vehicles and scattered bodies. Syra'Neth guided the craft toward the human positions, toward the hill they had defended so fiercely, toward her daughter. She landed at the edge of the combat zone, ignoring the protests of her pilot, and stepped out into hell. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and death. All around her, the sounds of battle continued, but they seemed distant now, unimportant. Nothing mattered except Lyra. She walked forward, past the bodies of Kral'Veth and humans alike, past the wreckage of war machines and the ruins of defensive positions. No one stopped her. Perhaps they were too shocked to see the queen walking alone through a battlefield. Perhaps they simply didn't recognize her. She didn't care. The human lines loomed ahead, barricades and weapons pointed in her direction. She kept walking. If they wanted to kill her, let them. She would die trying to reach her child. But the weapons didn't fire. The humans watched her approach with expressions she couldn't read. Confusion, perhaps. Suspicion. But not hostility. She reached the first barricade and stopped. A human soldier stepped forward, his weapon raised but not aimed at her. "Where is my daughter?" Syra'Neth asked. Her voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. "Your soldiers took her. She's 8 cycles old. She's just a child. Please." The soldier stared at her for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon. "Follow me," he said. The human led her through the defensive positions, past rows of wounded soldiers and exhausted fighters, toward the base of the hill. Syra'Neth saw everything and nothing. Her entire being was focused on one thing. Lyra. They reached a large tent, marked with human medical symbols. The soldier stopped at the entrance and gestured inside. "In there," he said. "She's safe." Syra'Neth pushed past him and entered the tent. Inside, the smell of antiseptic and blood filled the air. Rows of cots held wounded soldiers, humans and Kral'Veth alike, being treated side by side. And there, at the far end of the tent, Lyra. Her daughter was sitting on a cot, a human kneeling beside her. The human was applying some kind of salve to a cut on Lyra's arm, a minor wound, nothing serious. But Lyra wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She was watching the human with an expression of wonder. The human turned at Syra'Neth's cry and she recognized him immediately. Sergeant Marcus Cole. The medic she had watched on the tactical display, the one who had spent hours saving lives on both sides of the battle. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, blood staining his uniform. Most of it probably not his own. But his hands were gentle as he finished treating Lyra's wound, and his voice was soft as he spoke to her. "There you go, little one. All better." Lyra looked up and saw her mother. Her face lit up with joy. "Mother!" She jumped off the cot and ran. Syra'Neth felt her heart stop. The tent was crowded. Between her and Lyra stood dozens of wounded soldiers, medical equipment, human doctors and nurses. Her daughter was running through the middle of an enemy medical station, running toward her, running. The queen of the Kral'Veth Empire went still. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to grab her daughter, to protect her. But she couldn't. Because in that moment, watching Lyra run through the humans without fear, watching them step aside to let her pass, watching Marcus Cole smile softly as the child he had been treating rushed to her mother. In that moment, Syra'Neth understood something that changed everything. These humans, these fragile, short-lived, impossible creatures, had taken her daughter from a warship. They could have held her hostage. They could have used her as leverage to end the battle in their favor. They could have hurt her in 1,000 ways. Instead, they had brought her to a medical tent. They had treated her wounds. They had kept her safe. And now they were letting her go. Lyra crashed into her mother's arms, and Syra'Neth held her tight, feeling her daughter's hearts beat against her own. She was alive. She was unharmed. She was here. "Mother, the humans are nice," Lyra said, her voice muffled against Syra'Neth's robes. "The man, Marcus, he gave me food. He said I was brave." Syra'Neth looked up at Marcus Cole, who had risen from his crouch and was watching them with tired, gentle eyes. He didn't look like a monster. He didn't look like the savage warrior her people had made the humans out to be. He looked like someone who had been trying to do the right thing in the middle of hell. "Why?" Syra'Neth asked. The word came out broken, barely audible. "Why did you save her? Why didn't you use her against us?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Around them, the medical tent continued its work, human and Kral'Veth medics moving between patients, doing what they could to ease suffering regardless of species. "Because she's a child," Marcus said finally. "Because some things matter more than winning." Syra'Neth felt something crack inside her. The certainty she had carried into this war, about humans, about warfare, about what was necessary and what was right, All of it crumbled in the face of this simple statement. Some things matter more than winning. The evacuation ships, Marcus continued. Your people have been trying to stop ours from taking off. But we've got 2,000 civilians back there. Families, kids, just trying to get somewhere safe. That's all they want. That's all any of us want. He gestured around the medical tent, at the wounded being treated regardless of which side they fought on. We're not trying to destroy. We're just trying to survive. To protect the people who can't protect themselves. He met her eyes. I think maybe you understand that. Syra'Neth looked down at Lyra, still clutched in her arms. Yes, she understood that. I will call off the attack, she said quietly. Your civilians will evacuate safely. Marcus blinked in surprise. Just like that. Just like that. She rose to her feet, still holding Lyra close. This war started over a misunderstanding. Perhaps it can end with one act of understanding. She turned to leave, then stopped, looked back at the human who had saved her daughter, Sergeant Cole. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you have the gratitude of the Kral'Veth throne. This, I swear. Marcus smiled, a tired, genuine smile that transformed his worn face. Just take care of her, he said, nodding toward Lyra. That's enough for me. Syra'Neth walked out of the medical tent, her daughter in her arms, and gave the order to cease fire. Around her, the sounds of battle slowly faded, replaced by a silence that felt almost sacred. She had come to this planet expecting to end a war through victory. Instead, she had found something far more valuable. She had found hope. As the evacuation ships lifted off in the distance, carrying human civilians to safety, Lyra looked up at her mother with curious eyes. Mother, are we friends with the humans now? Syra'Neth watched the ships disappear into the clouds and thought about everything she had witnessed. The sacrifice, the compassion, the simple, stubborn refusal to abandon what was right, even in the face of death. I think perhaps we are, she said softly. I think perhaps we always should have been. In the years that followed, the galaxy would remember this day as the turning point, the moment when the Kral'Veth and humanity stepped back from the brink of annihilation. Historians would debate the causes, analyze the strategies, examine the political implications. But Syra'Neth would always remember it differently. She would remember the way her daughter had run through that medical tent without fear. She would remember the tired kindness in Marcus Cole's eyes. She would remember the moment when everything she thought she knew about humans had shattered, replaced by something far more complex and beautiful. She would remember the moment she went still, and in that stillness found peace. In the midst of an interstellar war between the ancient Kral'Veth Empire and the young human race, Queen Syra'Neth watches her forces clash against an enemy that defies all logic. When human infiltrators kidnap her young daughter, she descends to the battlefield expecting the worst. What she finds instead will change the course of galactic history. A powerful HFI story about war, compassion, and the moment when understanding can bridge the gap between worlds. Ein